Here we go.
Let's talk about another big game that's not coming this month. Unfortunately, we have to wait a little bit longer.
But it's coming next
September
month.
15th.
Yeah, that's so close. And it is Metroid.
Oh, it's like just in time for me
Samus
to take it to
Returns.
TGS too.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll play on the way to Japan.
We are getting a new Metroid game for the Nintendo 3DS. And if you're still bummed out that it's not on Switch, obviously you're getting a Switch Prime in the future.
Switch Prime.
I was very, very pleasantly surprised with the level of art style
this game rules.
and the presentation, you know, from what I played. It looks so nice.
I'll keep saying it's the one game I want to play in 3D.
Yeah.
Like I turn on 3D, it's like, wow, this is actually really cool and adds so much to it.
Before we talk more about our impressions from actually playing it, I want to give a shout out to Marshall Gorduk. He's one of our most prolific NVC fans. Marshall has autism, and he's active as an ambassador of the Autism Speaks organization. He sends us a lot of mail, a lot of emails and tweets, but he also sent us a nice package with personal letters, old classic snail letters for everybody on the NVC team, and asked us about Metroid. That's one of the franchises that he cares about more than anything.
Same.
And so he asked this specific question to all of you. Can you please tell me, from the bottom of your hearts, why you care about Metroid? What does Metroid mean to you? I have trouble understanding why people care about the same things as I do because I have autism and I'm not able to fully understand other people's feelings and emotions compared to mine. So what attracts you guys to this franchise?
To me, more so than any other franchise, Metroid is about an atmosphere and about a feeling. I think especially Metroid Prime, the first one, I don't think that I've played a game. Maybe Shadow of Colossus had like a similar feeling of this sort of like loneliness and desolation. But I feel like Prime, especially because you're just out there. Samus doesn't have a horse. She's just out there on her own fighting all those bad Metroid boys. And that sense of isolation, that sense of loneliness, just like the atmospheric music, it really, I think more so than any franchise, it sets a mood better than any other series that I know.
Yeah. For me, and Marshall brought this up too, and said, "Why do you guys care about it so much when it's not as recognized as Mario, Zelda, any of the other great Nintendo franchises like Pokemon that outsell Metroid?" For me, my love affair with that game actually started back in 1994 when Super Metroid came out. I lived in Japan. I had rediscovered my love for gaming, got myself the Super Famicom, played games like Legend of Zelda, and I really got this sense that there was something really, really special about these Nintendo games that build a story through the items and the abilities you collect. If you play Link to the Past, you start with nothing in the rain, has this amazing atmosphere of you against the world, right? You're out there alone. Super Metroid started the same way. Like a spaceship came down, and so the moment I started playing that, I'm like, oh my god, is this like Link to the Past but 2D?
But space. Yeah.
Like that same kind of atmosphere and kind of loneliness where you become more and more powerful, with the difference that in Super Metroid, you're already a badass. Like in the Metroid franchise, you don't start as the little kid. You play as a badass bounty hunter, and then you have a very specific goal. I'm also a huge fan of the Aliens franchise. So Alien, the original Ridley Scott movie, the James Cameron sequel, I really love those films, but I will always cherish that kind of isolation and loneliness you got from Alien 1.
Yeah.
And I felt like Super Metroid more than anything embodied that, where it's like, you have a goal, get off this planet, or in this game specifically, hunt down all the Metroids, and like you're like singularly focused on this thing, and then you get derailed and you try to work like with this environment, and like you walk into a room and you're like getting cooked and you're like, oh, get out quick, That's what attracted me to this franchise.
I got an NES when I was a little kid in the 80s, and I picked out a couple games, and one of them was this game called Metroid, and because it had like a robot astronaut on the cover who was fighting like a yellow porcupine or whatever it was back then. And I didn't know anything about it. I remember starting out and hearing that music and seeing the character model head on from the beginning, or the sprite, which you never saw back then. And then immediately realizing you could go left. And then going, wait, what? Like Mario makes me go right. Every platforming game makes me go right, and I keep running. And I went left and I got a morph ball. And I was like, oh, I can shrink and turn into a ball and start rolling around. And then exploring that game and realizing like this is my first time experiencing like playable dystopian sci-fi. And knowing that this was this character that could go into these elevators, down into these like almost tomb-like areas, and just get lost. I would just wake up on a Saturday morning, start playing that game and being like, I don't even know where I am in this world. I'm like 70 elevators deep. There's enemies I've never seen before. They're playing this like terrifying 8-bit sci-fi music. And then one day beating the game, and then Spaceman takes off his helmet and it's a woman.
Yep.
And you're like, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was a good twist, huh?
Yeah. So I've always loved those games.
What about you, Miranda? You're a little younger than us old men here.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'm a bit younger.
Huh? Some of us.
Not as old as you guys.
He's only he's
2
22.
years younger than
Zach is 22.
Wow, younger than me.
Yeah.
So I am interested in Metroid because of how interested everyone else is and how much they love Metroid. And I think Samus is just a cool character. My first interaction with Metroid was Metroid Prime Hunters demo on the Nintendo DS, the original one. And so that was the only exposure I had at that point, because like didn't have older friends that had like grew up with Nintendo, and I was pretty much like the oldest of the people that I knew with gaming. So this was my first exposure. I was like, wow,
entry point.
This is so cool. Yeah. And I played that demo a whole bunch. Like I don't remember how many times I played it. And that was it. And I never played any Metroid thing again.
Holy moly, are you serious?
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, now.
I mean, it's just like there's so many games. Like I was very fortunate to grow up with like multiple systems.
Right.
And my parents were very much like, here's the new Pokemon. So I like get into the new Pokemon, and I just never really, I guess, had a reason to be interested in Metroid until I grew up and heard that everyone loves Metroid. So that's why I'm very excited for Samus Returns.
I feel like there's still good in you, and we can get you to play even Metroid Prime 1 and discover why it's awesome. So your experience, I think, is really interesting because you're not alone. There are a lot of people who have never played a Metroid game, and if you look at the sales numbers for that franchise, it just doesn't live up to Nintendo's core franchise, right? Like your Mario, Zelda, Pokemon just perform much, much better. So it's really interesting that was your entry point.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting kind of getting into it now, because I'm very excited about that, because I do love Nintendo franchises. Like Zelda's profoundly important to me, and like me growing up and stuff. But yeah, I somehow missed Metroid.
So Marshall, that's why we care about the Metroid franchise. I hope you agree with us that there's something special there. So let's talk about why we care about this specific game, Samus Returns, coming to the Nintendo 3DS. For me, I started playing it and it all came back. Because the way it gets introduced, it just feels like classic, Metroid, NES, Super NES Metroid. It's kind of hard to see the Game Boy skeleton underneath it all because they changed so much
of it, yeah.
It doesn't feel like you're playing a remake. It doesn't feel like you're playing a remake of like a 4-bit game that had no map and no colors.
Yeah, it feels like a brand new game. Yeah.
And that was my biggest fear going into this when it first got announced, when we first saw screenshots for it. I was like, if it doesn't feel right, like Mario games all have that. There's a specific way Super Mario jumps, and if he doesn't, it feels weird, right?
You're right. Imposter.
Yeah. If there's just something off about that rhythm, that movement, that sort of the momentum. And I feel the same thing about Metroid, and jumping into this game and immediately running around and shooting things and traversing the environment, turning into a ball, and like finding little hidden nooks and crannies and like secrets and stuff. I was like, this is Metroid. This is great.
I think Mercury's team just nailed it. Like more so than with Castlevania, like they really, when you hold down the button and you're able to kind of free aim around, it just feels right.
Yeah.
It feels so good. I think the morph ball is a little sticky, but it's always been like that in the franchise. But overall, the
sticky
motion
ball is supposed to be the one that's sticky.
Overall, I feel like the feel of it is right, and then I think the art is actually remarkably good. Like I got real Retro Studios vibes with the background.
I was so impressed.
Yeah, it's got a cool like almost Egyptian vibe to it. Yeah, like the machinations and stuff in the background. Like I agree with you. It looks more so like the retro stuff than it looks like Super Metroid or even like Zero Mission.
I mean, the Chozo look very Egyptian.
Yes,
right? And so they play with that, and they build these bigger contraptions with like lights that light up that look like classic Egyptian art. And then the layering, you were talking about the 3D, right?
Yeah, they're like, play with the 3D on. And usually I don't, because I get a little sick whenever I, jostle it around, especially with the newer 3DSs. And they're like, no, do it. And I was like, okay. And then I just turn it on. And I was just like, oh, hey, this is one I will definitely play in 3D. Like at least halfway 3D. Like it is just so good. It is. The environment is just amazing.
You played it at Comic-Con, right? You got to play it at Comic-Con?
Yeah.
You were there for the Disney with the IGN show that's airing on Disney XD if you haven't watched it. We're taking 1 week break and then it's back, right?
I think we're airing our first 10 episodes for the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we're just doing reruns.
So you
right
can
now, but then we're
rerun.
coming
You can
back
watch the
soon.
reruns. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're coming up very
But
soon.
yeah, there was a segment of you going to the Nintendo booth, actually checking out Metroid, some of the games.
Yes, a lot of other things. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun with that segment. I mostly just did Nintendo stuff at Comic-Con. I was so happy.
That's awesome.
Nice to meet Pikachu.
Yeah,
Saw
and
that.
Happiest day.
we had so much material.
was so
We
happy.
split it over 2 episodes. Look those up.
Yeah.
You can also find the IGN show on IGN.
Yeah, of
surprisingly,
course.
go to IGN, just mouse over
Makes
shows,
sense.
and it's right there. So
Yeah.
you can catch the
I
Metroid
believe
stuff in there
those
too.
are episodes 9 and 10. So we talked about Metroid, talked about Skyrim on Switch, we talked about Super Mario Odyssey, of course. So we had a ton of stuff in there. But yes, I did get to play Samus Returns, and I was very happy they got me to do it. Because like I said, this is my first experience really with an actual Metroid game. That's not a demo.
So you're in.
Oh yeah,
You're gonna
I'm
play
very
this one.
in. I'm very excited to play this.
Nice.
The 3D works really well on it because it looks like you're kind of looking into like a diorama. I've always really loved
Yeah.
3D on 2D planes.
Yeah.
And Nintendo handles them really well. Like this specifically, it's just got this awesome. It just feels like there's a tiny Metroid world in your hand.
It's
Yeah.
and it has there's one area that has kind of like a fog layer in the
Yeah.
background, and so you have a background, then you have fog in between, then you have another background, behind it. It just gives this 2D game so much depth, and it runs well. When you switch on the 3D, there's a tiny little performance hit. With the 3D off, it runs a little faster, but it's not anything to impair the feel or the controls.
I always find it strange to like demo a Metroid game, which admittedly I haven't had the chance to do in a while because there haven't been one in the years I've been working in this industry. But it's always weird because those games start off with, spoilers, you have a bunch of stuff, they take it all away, you have nothing, and you slowly build back up. And when you play a demo, you're like, I have the morph ball, but I don't have bombs. I have missiles, but I don't have the ice beam. Like eventually you'll get everything, but they showed us just this
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
Oh man,
Ice beam.
Ice beam. They showed us a part where it was just you're kind of, I would guess, early on in the game.
Well,
You don't
so-
really have a ton of stuff yet.
So I handed my demo unit off to you.
Yeah.
And I started at the very beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And so like
did too. I started from the very beginning.
I started from the very beginning. The ship comes down. Da, 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 psh, right? Chills.
Yep.
And then you find, I think within the first 5 minutes of playing, I found the morph ball, I found a missile upgrade, I found an energy upgrade just by poking around. And that's the thing about Metroid that will keep you coming back, is because there's always something to discover
They're
there.
so well hidden too.
Yeah. And one of the first actually, I don't know if I can talk about that. I can't remember if that's before or after.
Well, in the
embargo.
very beginning, there's a power up
The
that lets you
sonar?
scan.
That's the one.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that one is okay.
Okay, yeah. So,
we've seen
we've
that
played
one.
that. It's cool.
embargoes. You get this power up that basically lets you use sonar, and so you can scan an area. You can scan the map that you're looking at, and it'll show you if there's like items or enemies or
Destructible
Metroids.
bricks.
Yeah, exactly. Really, really cool.
It's like,
Yeah, and I mean, Metroid purists might choose to play without that, because part of the fun is figuring out like, oh, I didn't realize I could destroy that block, or I didn't know that this wall had something behind it. But the idea that this game specifically is about tracking down X amount of things.
Yeah.
it's,
like you can
the bounty hunter game in the franchise.
like you can
right?
finish Metroid games with 60% completion, 70% completion rate if you don't find every energy tank, if you don't find every missile upgrade. But this game specifically, to beat it, you have to find all the Metroid, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a confession. I kind of feel bad about killing Metroid.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should.
So,
They're cute.
Yeah. and you're-
but they're different variations
So,
of
yeah.
Metroids, and they're not themselves.
So when they evolve into that weird buggy thing, I was like, no, you gotta go.
So that one you're
Like,
cool.
you're getting out of here.
Okay.
But just the little guy with the teeth, you were like
I was
not
just like,
into.
oh,
yeah.
like what if I just pet you? Will you be happier? Can we find you something else to eat?
So you're a huge anime fan. Maybe you should play the one with the baby.
Yeah.
Other
Baby.
M? That's what you want her first Metroid game before.
Well, but she's used to nonsense
other M.
storylines. Sorry.
Oh, shots fired.
No, I mean
Yeah.
other M is actually an interesting game. It just it's not quite as good as the other titles in the Metroid franchise.
See, I'm of the camp that thinks that the gameplay in Other M is totally fine,
Yeah.
and
No,
definitely
but-
worthwhile, but the story is just
no,
bunk.
but it is very anime.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you
oh,
say?
for sure.
Yeah.
The story is
That's fine
very
with me.
anime.
Yeah,
I'm
and,
down
and
with
that
that.
that talks about like it's more about the Metroid isn't the enemy per se.
She does the
So,
thumbs down.
That's what she does in the in one of the opening cutscenes. She's just very dramatic.
Because she realizes she's in Metroid Other M.
Yeah.
So
So it's
fine. It's
come
totally
on.
fine.
I know that game. There's so many haters. That game is fine.
I'm not a hater.
Okay.
Of that game.
We all like
I'm a hater
different
of that.
things.
You know what I
That's
really?
okay.
It's okay.
You know what I really like about Samus Returns though? It's like the small additions, like the wall grab when you jump up to a wall.
Yeah.
It really changes the feel of the game. But the parry, the counter move,
The
is
melee
really
counter,
good.
yeah.
So that one's a little weird because it does take a little bit to get used to because there's a
Timing.
little delay in it.
It's
not
almost-
a
sorry, go
quick.
ahead.
It's just like a
Yeah.
okay.
It's almost like a rhythm game.
Yeah.
Because an enemy will telegraph when it's going to do an attack that you can counter. And it's like,
brrr,
so
like
it's
it
like,
charges,
it's
right?
like a 3 count. Like it'll show you that it's going to do something, and then it'll move, and then on the 3rd count you have to counter.
Yep.
And it took me a while to get it down.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, and I actually played through. Rich George, who was here giving us the demos, friend of the pod. He was making fun of me because throughout the duration of my playthrough, he could just hear my alarm going off because I was so close to dying, like the whole time that I was playing.
Yep.
Because I was only trying to counter for the first half of that demo until I got it down.
Yeah.
But the counter completely changes the way you play that game. It's
yeah.
really cool. It's
Totally
the key
agree.
to beating some of the mini bosses. Yeah, it's really
And it's
smart.
got, you get a little bit of an auto aim right after you execute it on an enemy. So if an enemy moves up slightly, it follows, the shots follow. So there's some good strategy in that title. Really excited about it. It comes out September 15th. As we get to play more and get to explore more, we'll definitely be talking more about that. I mean, we've talked for years about how there isn't a Metroid game, so we better talk about
I
it.
just want that squishy Metroid amiibo.
I do like the amiibos too.
Yeah, we know. You have them all.
If you enjoyed this little discussion, be sure to look up the full episode of Nintendo Voice Chat, our weekly Nintendo show. You can find us at youtube.com/Nintendo Voice Chat, so go check it out.